Welcome to the Wild West city of Dodge City, Kansas, kind of a famous western town. And right here I'm sitting on a replica of Old Front Street where all the wild times happened back in the day. So let's take a little look at Dodge City, kind of drive around a few of the things around town, a little history of the town, but a lot of the history is told here in the Boot Hill Museum. So that's what we're going to mostly focus on. So let's show you a little bit of downtown and then come over here to the replica. It's a lot of cool stuff to check out, especially if you like Wild West history. Dodge City's history is rooted in its proximity to Fort Dodge and the Santa Fe Trail, but it truly exploded with the arrival of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway in 1872. The name Dodge comes from Grenville Dodge, who was a Union Army general on the frontier and a pioneering figure in military intelligence during the Civil War. He served as Ulysses S. Grant's intelligence chief in the Western Theater. The heart of early Dodge City was Front Street, which sat on both sides of the railroad tracks. The railroad tracks served as a literal boundary for law enforcement. The north side, lawful and relatively quiet, guns were prohibited. The south side, wide open and lawless, home to numerous saloons, gambling halls, and brothels catering to rowdy Texas cowboys and buffalo hunters. At its peak in 1884, up to 15,000 cattle passed through daily. With a permanent population of only 1,200, the town boasted 19 licensed liquor establishments. Lawmen like Wyatt, Earp, and Masterson patrolled these streets to maintain order among figures like Doc Holliday. By the mid-1880s, the wild era ended due to quarantine laws against Texas cattle and the arrival of more permanent settlers. Today, Dodge City is the Ford County seat and has a population of over 27,000. The Boot Hill Museum is dedicated to preserving the Old West heritage of the area. It's located on the original site of the Boot Hill Cemetery, which gained notoriety in the 1870s as a burial ground for those who, quote, died with their boots on, typical drifters and gunfighters who met violent ends. The burial ground was short-lived. By 1878, the land was deemed too valuable, and the bodies were moved to other areas. The site transitioned from a neglected graveyard to a historical attraction in the early 20th century. Today, the museum houses over 60,000 artifacts and serves as a living history center. I like how they did this timeline and had authentic items like Doc Holliday's dentist chair. You know, back in the day, the dentist was kind of considered the doctor of the area, and to think Doc Holliday was your doctor, that'd be pretty interesting. But they had so many great photos. I really loved how they had so many terrific old photos. You know, on this channel, I always post a lot of old photos, and people like those. And if you like stuff like that, then, you know, like that Dust Bowl shot right there in Dodge City. Like, that's some real historic stuff. And this is a great way to start the museum if you've never been here and don't know much about Dodge City. And you can learn a lot, and they go into nice detail here. So I thought this was, before you get into like the main part of the museum, this was a good place to get started. A lot of television and movies were, you know, basically based on Dodge City.
How'd you like to see Dodge City, Kansas?
Don't mean nothing to me.
It's interesting how this small western Kansas town, because it was a pretty small town, like I talked about in the intro, how it got to become so well known. And so there's lots of stuff to look at there. And then you can go through the gift shop and then head on over into the main part of the museum.
We hear a lot about the Cheyenne.
They do a good job with things being very interactive. So if you have youngsters, they probably would enjoy checking out a lot of the stuff here. Then you go into the, after you see the wagon here, you go into the Raising a Ruckus area. That'd be more for the adults.
actually the only one, but it's definitely the finest. We offer any libation you could possibly wish for, so long as it's whiskey. No, sir. I've got big plans.
Certainly having a saloon back in the day here in Dodge City was probably a good idea if you wanted to make some money, but not a good idea if you wanted to live a long and uneventful life. Lots of cool photos of the old saloons there. Certainly a lot of Native American history in this area as well. They talk through the tumultuous times of trying to have settlers come out and go into this land where Native Americans had been for a long time. And obviously the buffalo was a big part of that.
As an all-encompassing natural resource. Feed the tribe, but hides for clothing, rope made from fur, tools carved from bone, even fuel.
Stagecoach and the railroad here, big parts of the history of Dodge City. Travel is always a big part of these towns, whether they survive or they fade away. And Dodge City being on the railroad, being basically the end of the railroad where the cattle drive would start, that's a big part of the reason it became important.
Would you like to meet? And I could bring my mama and papa. A year is a long time to be.
It's some pretty interesting videos on screens like that. So you'd be walking and somebody'd be talking and you didn't realize that was a video, not a real person. There are real people that, kind of dress up and act like people from back in the 1870s. There's all the old cattle trails. I'm from Wichita, so you can see where Wichita is on the Chisholm Trail there, so a nod to that. There's a lot more outside of the museum, but it's kind of cool because a lot of places you go, there's just an indoor area or maybe an outdoor area, but here at Boot Hill they have both. Looks like they're having a grand old time there. Definitely was not always fun and games in Dodge City.
Yeah, I think about setting up and dealing with them. It's good money fair.
It's pretty interesting how they had the characters on the screens. There's some of the old lawmen of Dodge City kind of having conversation back and forth with each other.
In here with their rowdyism, intimidating everyone, carrying weapons. You're carrying ancient, and a good thing I do. Matt, you look tough. When you face down my double barrel, you drop your coals quick.
Now, we're all friendly here, so long as I run the long branch.
All right, now we've seen the inside. Let's go outside. We'll go back inside on the other side of the street here. You can see some of the old Front Street replicas. We're going to go up the incline to the jail. This is the old Fort Dodge jail. So not Dodge City, but Fort Dodge, built around the Civil War time. So you imagine having a rough day and ended up in here at the end of the night. Back behind one of the buildings up here, they have the Boot Hill Cemetery. And it's kind of hard to know where people were buried because this area was where people were originally buried. And now it feels more like a replica of what the cemetery might have been. And they do have signs and little markers and areas to make it look like, this is where somebody was buried. But there's also graves in different parts of the area too, not just up here like on the top of the hill. They have some near where we walked up originally and then kind of scattered throughout. So not quite sure that they might kind of want to not tell the whole story, to ruin the illusion of where people were buried. But it's cool that they've done this and they have that info there about the cemetery. So we'll head back inside, and this is what you might call the cowboy culture. They have all kinds of different things about cowboys up here, whether it's television or real life. If you like cowboy history, Wild West history, you certainly want to come check out the Boot Hill Museum. Lots to look at. You could spend an entire day if you really wanted to go through the detail of what they got here. Then they get more into some of the real cowboy stuff. And they even talk about like the different ones. They can see like it says rodeo cowboy, working cowboy, entertainers. And you can see they have the Kansas Cowboy Hall of Fame there. There's the rancher cattlemen. They start having a little display of like what the different cowboys might be looking like and doing. And like I saw earlier, the working cowboy. And then the rodeo cowboy. Tough guys there. Some ladies doing that stuff too. So now we're back down on the ground level. I'm going to check out the general store. There were some people here today. It was a chilly day, but there were still some visitors. Good to see plenty of people stopping in on a cold day.
Howdy, city slickers. Welcome to the Long Branch. No fighting, no cussing, no gunslinging. Watch what you say to our bartender.
Gotta love the reference to the Long Branch Saloon in the movie Vacation. They stop in Dodge City, and this is where they stopped. Good old Chevy Chase in the Vacation movies. Some of my favorite classic comedies.
Hey, underpants. Hey, yellow.
So now we're basically going to walk through this side. I guess you'd call it the museum, the outdoor museum. And they have all kinds of different things. So instead of going out and back in every time, you can just kind of take a hallway and walk through all of them. And once again, there's the dentist's office, which double as a doctor's office. Guns that won the West. There are a lot of guns on display. If you like checking out historic guns, they have all kinds of guns. What the frontiersmen would use, buffalo hunters, lawmen, gamblers. Everybody had guns that were specific to their jobs. I'm not a gun guy myself, but it is pretty interesting checking out the history of all these guns. This is what a gunsmith shop would have looked like. Oh yeah, one more last group with the guns, the outlaws, and then the lawmen that had to deal with those outlaws. You know, Wyatt Earp is always the one you kind of glance to initially because so famous with the movies that were made about him, Tombstone and all that, and to see the kind of gun he shot was interesting. Love that old picture of Front Street, 1873. That would have been in the times of the craziness. Interesting, you know, how they talk about the prostitution of the area. Called them the Jezebels. Hi.
Today. Back here, an entire page would be put in, clipped down, it would be rolled down and pressed down, and that's our Washington press.
Undertaker was certainly have been a busy guy back in the day. I always like checking out what old post offices might have looked like. You know, I still see post offices today when I visit these small towns that don't look too much different. And obviously the bank would have been one of the most important places in the cities. So they do a really good job of recreating a lot of the different places, and some of the things obviously are recreations and some of them are authentic in terms of the things that are inside these areas. I found this kind of interesting with the old photo equipment. You know, all these pictures we see, you don't think about like how hard it was to take those photos. So they had a little restaurant here at the end of the walk, and at least the inside part of the walk, that you can get some ice cream or something like that. It wasn't a full-blown restaurant today. Back outside, there's a few more things, a couple other buildings to check out before we finish up. This is a house that was, I think kind of made up to show you what a large house of the era would have looked like, just how it would be set up with the kitchen area, with the living room, bedrooms. So some of it was closed off, but interesting to look at some of this. There's what the women were supposed to do on a daily basis. It was 1870s, so it was different times for sure. Some really big houses. I'm sure this was a house that belonged to a significant person in Dodge City. Union Church here, I believe, is one of the oldest churches in Dodge City. So nice to go in and see what that looks like. This is not necessarily a replica. This is, I believe, one of the original churches. We're going to head out and walk to the exit. You know, this is an interesting place. It's very touristy, obviously, and I'm not one to usually go to like the touristy places. I'm more of the off the beaten path type places, but there's so much history in Dodge City, and they worked really hard putting this together. I'm not sure how to do it in a more authentic way, you know. So it's nice how they've done it, and they put so much work into it, and they also make it so it's family friendly. They have, you know, shootouts out here. You know, they have like gunfights and things like that, and so certainly there's a business side to this with something so significant. So I think it's a fun place to visit, whether you're really just into the history of the Wild West or you have a family and you need to entertain some kids for a couple hours. I think they do a nice job. So definitely glad I visited the Boot Hill Museum here in Dodge City. Certainly would recommend for anybody that's interested in the Wild West history to come check it out.